Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Psychology of Superheroes, an Unauthorized Exploration. Edited by Robin S. Rosenberg, Ph.D., with Jennifer Canzaneri. Narrated by Emily Ellet. Publisher's Note. In this audio edition, you will hear references to illustrations, figures, charts, and tables present in the print and ebook formats of this book. Disclaimer. This publication has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by any entity that created or produced the Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, or X-Men properties. Introduction. Robin S. Rosenberg, Ph.D. When I was growing up in New York City in the 1960s and 1970s, I read the comics of lots of different superheroes, whatever I could borrow, but I reserved my allowance money for Superman and Batman comics. As I got older, I stopped reading comics, although my admiration for superheroes continued into adulthood. I avidly and repeatedly watched their films. Time passed, and I had children. As they began to read, I introduced them to comics, Batman and Superman, naturally. In turn, they introduced me to the X-Men, which they heard about from their friends. We would read the comics together. Between reading comic books during my childhood and reading them with my children, something happened that altered how I viewed them, something more than becoming an adult. I became a clinical psychologist. In reading the superhero stories with my children, I read the stories not only through adult lenses, but also through psychologist lenses. And what I saw was a surprise. As an adult, I saw that superhero stories are about morality and loyalty, about self-doubt and conviction of beliefs. I also saw that, like any good fiction, the sagas of superheroes bring us out of ourselves and connect us with something larger than ourselves, something more universal. Moreover, in our superheroes' foibles, struggles, and triumphs, we can see elements of our own foibles and struggles, and hope for our triumphs. As a psychologist, I spotted the ways in which their stories reflect psychological theories and research findings. For instance, in the wake of witnessing his parents' brutal murder, Bruce Wayne decides to dedicate his life to protecting innocent lives. Thus was Batman born. Psychological research suggests that the underlying process of the birth of Batman isn't far-fetched, and is in fact common. After people have experienced a traumatic event, they often struggle to make meaning of the experience, and one such path is through social action. Superheroes also serve as models of moral behavior. They try to figure out the right path to take in a given situation. When, if ever, is it okay to lie in the service of a greater good? When should violence or the threat of violence be used as a punishment? When should it be used as a deterrent? How much force is too much? How can a small band of people fight against the never-ending parade of criminals? And how can people maintain hope in the face of such adversity? These are questions that most of us have grappled with and tried to answer at various points in our lives. I did as a child, and I still do. As a child, I found it illuminating that Batman and Superman often had different answers to these moral questions. But from each superhero's struggles and actions, I had the opportunity to learn something about myself, as you may have learned about yourself through your favorite superhero's struggles. Their moral journeys serve as models for our own journeys. We get to try on a view of morality or style of leadership by immersing ourselves in a superhero's story. In trying it on, we get to see how well it fits or doesn't fit. Psychologists call this process of learning through observing others observational learning. Through observing others, we learn something that we can apply to ourselves. The essays in this volume help to illuminate how superheroes reflect, or don't reflect, what we have learned from psychology. As you read these essays, I hope you discover, as I did, that learning about relevant psychological research and theories and applying them to superheroes can enrich your experiences with the comic book characters. This book investigates psychological theories and research results as applied to superhero phenomena large and small. On the small scale, this volume includes essays that focus on the psychology of the person, or in this case, the superhero. Many of these essays examine the psychological implications of having superpowers. What is it like to live with super senses, super abilities, and superpowers? Is there a superhero in all of us? Mind-reading superheroes? The Incredible Hulk. Living and coping with super stresses. The positive psychology of superheroes. Positive psychology of Peter Parker. Coping with stress, the superhero way. Ways that the environment shapes and motivates superheroes. Superman's personality, an appetite for destruction, coming to terms with Bizarro, cracking the superhero's moral code. Ways that super abilities and superpowers influence the superhero's mission in life. When I grow up, I want to be a superhero. And the moral dilemmas faced. Anti-heroism in the continuum of good and evil. In fact, in our own way, each of us experiences a version of these same qualities and experiences, as these essays point out. Other essays in this volume focus on larger elements, on the psychology of groups, institutions, and societies. How groups such as the Justice League of America function, the social psychology of the Justice League of America. Issues of discrimination, prejudice lessons from the Xavier Institute. Issues related to gender, the stereotypical Wonder Woman, gender typicality and extremity in popular culture. Issues related to mental illness and its treatment. What would Freud say? Arkham Asylum. In terms of specific superheroes, this book has something for everyone. The Psychologist authors cast a wide net and included many different characters. Within these essays are discussed, in alphabetical order, Aquaman, the Avengers, Batman, Blade, Captain Marvel, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, The Flash, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Hellboy, the Hulk, The Incredibles, Justice League of America, Mystery Men, Plastic Man, The Punisher, Spider-Man, Star Trek and Star Wars characters, Superman, Thor, Wonder Woman, and the X-Men. Enjoy. The Positive Psychology of Superheroes. Christopher Peterson and Nansuk Park. Do superheroes live positive psychology's vision of a good life? Are superheroes happy? And if they're not happy, why should we want to be like them? In their essay, Peterson and Park examine whether superheroes have lives well lived. Peterson and Park focus on the superhero character, on the hero in superhero, and how a superhero's morality makes him or her different from the villains. Peterson and Park also discuss the ways in which a superhero's character is not like that of us humans, through connections with other people. If comic books can be examined from the vantage of literature, cultural history, and philosophy, then they can also be looked at in terms of psychology. A psychological interpretation of comic books can provide the framework for understanding the characters as well as the readers. Comic books have been extremely popular since their inception in the 1930s, and while comic book sales may have decreased in their absolute numbers, the popularity of superheroes is on the rise. Witness Hollywood films, television cartoons, lunchboxes, T-shirts, and U.S. postage stamps that feature familiar superheroes from Superman and Batman to Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk. Why have superheroes appealed to so many people for so many years? Psychology may provide an answer. We propose that superheroes allow us to see ourselves in stark and entertaining ways, and to dream of what we might be. As self-identified positive psychologists, we are interested in people being well and doing well. Part of our research program entails identifying what we call natural homes for positive psychology, settings in which excellence is recognized, celebrated, and nurtured. Studies of those who excel in these settings can teach the rest of us something about what makes life most worthwhile. Such natural homes include schools, businesses, the performing arts, sports, and the military. Are comics an additional natural home for positive psychology? Never mind that the superheroes who live there are fictional. Our heroes and heroines have always resided in stories, from biblical parables to the Harry Potter saga. Those who attempt to teach about good character invariably use stories to make their points. The stories may be real, apocryphal, or mythic, but we do not think it makes much difference if the point is to provide us with examples of a life well lived. Positive psychology has several topics of central concern. A. Positive subjective experiences, pleasure and happiness. B. Positive traits, values, talents, and good character. C. Rewarding social relationships, friendship and love. And D. Institutions that enable optimal functioning, the natural homes. According to positive psychology, the good life results when these factors align themselves. In this essay, we examine comic book superheroes in terms of these concerns and assess whether superheroes are also super people in terms of positive psychology's vision of the good life. The happiness of superheroes. Are superheroes happy? It certainly would seem fun to do what they can do. From decades ago, comic book ads hawked special devices that would allow purchasers to see through clothing or eavesdrop through walls. But Superman is not a voyeur, and one would be hard-pressed to find a superhero whose guiding orientation is hedonism. Indeed, a number of superheroes, the early and late Batman, and many characters from the Marvel stable, were brooding and neurotic. Even the most affluent of superheroes were not materialistic in a Scrooge-like way, which is probably good for their own well-being. One of the features of pleasure is that we adapt to it rather quickly, and superheroes appear no different from the rest of us, except that they have figured this out. How many lumps of coal can be squeezed into diamonds before the experience becomes old hat? In contrast, the villains with whom superheroes battle are always having fun. These archenemies are frequently mad scientists bent on world domination, immortality, and other goals that never seem to lose their appeal. Villains pursue their goals with obvious relish. The Joker not only looks like a clown, but also enjoys killing for its own sake, playing whimsical pranks and matching wits with Batman. According to one storyline, the Joker was a failed comedian. Other villainous motivations include Superman's nemesis, Lex Luthor's selfish desires to control the world while pretending to be a philanthropist. The enemy of Thor, his brother Loki, is the god of lies and mischief. The Black Manta, from Aquaman, seeks personal power. Captain Cold, one of the villains who battled the Flash, is motivated by money and, unusual for a comic book character, lechery. As Billy Joel sung, the sinners are much more fun, but that does not mean we root for them. Good should triumph over evil, especially evil pleasure. Positive psychology states that pleasure is but one ingredient of what happiness entails. A second important ingredient is engaging in what one does, and thereby experiencing the psychological state of flow. Superheroes are highly involved in what they do, so much so that when they occasionally and temporarily walk away from their callings, this becomes a plotline of significance. Yet another route to happiness entails a life of meaning, being connected to something larger than the self. For many people, religion provides meaning to their lives, although there are secular equivalents, including deep relations with others, or an abiding concern with nature or humanity writ large. Other than the handful who themselves are deities, Thor, Wonder Woman, few superheroes practice a conventional religion. Few are married, and fewer still have children. Superheroes have sidekicks and protégés, but rarely friends in the way that the term is usually used to describe a reciprocal relationship between peers. When superheroes occasionally band together, as in DC's Justice League or Marvel's Avengers, what we have is an all-star team of individuals. However, one of the defining features of a superhero is an overriding mission to serve the larger world and to defend it. In this sense, superheroes have profoundly meaningful lives. Our own research shows that engagement and meaning consistently trump pleasure in terms of their importance in leading a satisfied life, which means that superheroes are probably happier than most everyday people. However, we have also learned that the happiest people are those who experience engagement, meaning, and pleasure, what we can call a full life. Superheroes do not have the fullest possible lives. They do not stop and smell the roses, eat a good meal, or savor a soothing shower. They do not have hobbies. They are connected to humanity, but not to specific individuals. The character strengths of superheroes. Our particular research interest within positive psychology is moral character. Our concern is with the hero component of superheroes, and not with the super component. The extraordinary powers of superheroes are, of course, interesting and compelling to readers, but we believe that the real appeal of superheroes stems from their moral qualities as opposed to their talents. After all, not all superheroes have powers that transcend what is humanly possible. Read Batman. And many of the villains who figure prominently in comic books have their own superpowers. Virtually all superheroes have character strengths, usually to such a degree that we can describe them as paragons of one virtue or another. Iron Man is a fierce patriot. Wonder Woman is compassionate and empathic, as wise as Athena, and always able to discern what is true. Spider-Man has a self-deprecating sense of humor. And when Captain Marvel utters the magical acronym Shazam, he summons several virtues and abilities, those that are possessed by Solomon, wisdom, Hercules, physical strength, Atlas, stamina, Zeus, power, Achilles, courage, and Mercury, speed. That superheroes have conspicuous strengths of character sets them apart from many other potential role models in today's society, even in the fictional realm, where the anti-hero has ascended in recent decades. Where have all the heroes and heroines gone? One explanation for their scarcity is that contemporary journalism has thoroughly undressed most potential candidates. Past sports heroes no doubt abused drugs, and past government leaders no doubt cheated on their spouses. But the general public did not see their misdeeds unfold in real time on 24-hour cable television like we do today. We have few heroes except in comic books, because now everyone else has such well-documented feet of clay. However, the general public, if not the media, is usually sophisticated enough to know that even very good people are not saints, and no reasonable person expects them to be. Good character is not a present or absent monolith that can be vetoed by a single error or fault. Rather, character is a family of positive traits, and our research consistently shows that no one consistently possesses all such traits. It is enough to possess one or two notable strengths of character, what we term signature strengths, to be morally praiseworthy. Collectively, superheroes have all of the virtues that positive psychologists have identified in study, although no given superhero has them all. Their character is most accurately described in terms of a profile of greater and lesser strengths. The same is true for the everyday people to whom we have administered our surveys. Consider the character flaws of superheroes. As we see them, Captain Marvel can be immature, and Spider-Man can be peevish. Batman, at least in his early days, was much more angry and self-righteous than we would want even our casual acquaintances to be. And of all the possible Superman spin-offs, one featuring the Man of Steel doing stand-up comedy is simply not going to happen. But there is a notable difference between the profiles of more versus less typical character strengths of superheroes and everyday people. With some exceptions, everyday people seem more likely than superheroes to have what we call strengths of the heart that connect them to specific other people: love, kindness, gratitude, and humor. Furthermore, everyday people seem less likely than superheroes to display strengths of temperance like self-regulation and persistence, less likely to be courageous and hopeful, and less likely to have a sense of purpose and zest for life. So, most superheroes are not like most real people in terms of their specific character strengths. This is hardly surprising with respect to the strengths conspicuously possessed by superheroes. These strengths provide ample grounds for readers to admire superheroes. But less obvious, our positive psychology perspective additionally reveals some strengths of character to be conspicuously missing among most superheroes. The absence of these strengths may preclude envy and resentment on the part of readers. Trade-offs are inevitable among strengths of character, and superheroes have struck a different moral bargain than real people. Superman can retreat to his fortress of solitude and be content, but if and when everyday people isolate themselves from others, they are simply miserable. The personal relationships of superheroes. We have already noted the absence of personal relationships in the lives of superheroes, and the scarcity of character strengths that focus on specific individuals. For real people, close relationships with friends and family are perhaps the single biggest contributor to a satisfied life. Superheroes are therefore anything but super in these terms. The Fantastic Four are a notable exception to these generalizations. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, is married to Susan Richards, the Invisible Woman, who is the sister of Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. Ben Grimm, the Thing, is the longtime friend and former college roommate of Reed Richards. However, these relationships were established before their acquisition of superpowers during an outer space mission, and the Fantastic Four differ in other ways from the superhero template, lacking secret identities and, at least in the beginning, special costumes. Psychology provides two major perspectives on personal relationships. The first, equity theory, views relationships in economic terms and proposes that close relationships, friendships or romances, are established and persist to the degree that both people involved believe that what they are getting out of the relationship is proportional to what they are putting into it. Given the talents and abilities of superheroes, with whom could they have an equitable relationship? Other superheroes are the obvious answer, but the field is narrow, especially for romance and marriage. Even a casual reader of comic books knows that superheroes are predominantly male and predominantly heterosexual. The second psychological perspective in personal relationships is provided by attachment theory, which emphasizes the feelings that bind people together and traces them to the initial attachment between infant and mother. Securely attached infants become securely attached adults and capable of reciprocal relationships. Those without a history of secure attachment are socially challenged throughout life. In this area, superheroes appear no different than real people. Consider how many superheroes were orphans: Superman, Captain Marvel, Batman, Spider-Man, and Beast Boy. Or victims of early neglect and abuse: Professor X, Blade, and Venom. Other superheroes did not even have human parents in the first place: Hellboy and Wolverine. Psychology often contrasts these two theories of relationships, but in the case of superheroes, each theory predicts what we actually find in the comics: a paucity of personal relationships. A common plot device in superhero sagas is the thwarting of romance, ostensibly by the need of the superhero to keep his identity secret and protect the Lois Lanes of the world. From what, we ask, given the powers of the superhero? This is a noble rationale that may appeal to readers grappling with their own lack of close relationships, but the deeper psychological truth may be that superheroes, and their fans, are missing the point that real relationships are inherently imperfect, yet infinitely rewarding. Superheroes and societal institutions. Unlike their cousins in fantasy and science fiction stories, superheroes live in a world that is familiar to readers. The same societal institutions, police departments, schools, and churches, are found in comic books as in real life, along with the same historical timeline and events: World War II, the Civil Rights Movement, and space exploration. The chief difference between comic books and real life is, of course, the presence of one or more superheroes, which means that it is unsurprising that they are the focus. The larger world is simply the assumed and often unexamined backdrop. The focus on individual superheroes makes for a good comic book, which are not just stories, but illustrated stories. People's attention, at least in the Western world, is immediately drawn to the people in pictures, and not to the background. Nonetheless, this feature of comic books works against our goal of understanding the psychological good life. Real people, their happiness, their character, and their relationships do not exist in a vacuum. Context is always critical, and one of the most important contexts in which people need to be placed and understood is provided by societal institutions like the family, the school, the workplace, the community, and the nation. Positive psychology holds that given institutions can make it more or less easy for someone to have the good life. The characterization of what we call enabling institutions can be difficult, in large part because institutions are complex and have all sorts of effects on what people feel and do, from very good to very bad. Consider organized religion and the equally valid arguments for both its benefits and its costs throughout history. Given the complexity of all institutions, positive institutions are the weakest link of positive psychology, although efforts are ongoing to characterize them and understand how they influence the good life. Comic books have traditionally sidestepped the role of institutions. Consider that superheroes do not try to remake the world in profound ways. They do not try to cure cancer, eliminate poverty, or promote universal literacy. They are hardly revolutionaries. Superman and Batman fight corruption, but not the system that allows it to exist. World War II was an exception, and many superheroes helped the Allied war effort. But even in this case, few superheroes directly battled the Germans or the Japanese. Instead, they fought crime on the home front. Exceptions existed, of course, including Captain America and Wonder Woman, but these superheroes took on specific individuals, and not entire nations or their armies. Partly explaining why superheroes do not deal with larger societal institutions are the comic codes of 1948 and 1954. Among other things, they prohibited the presentation of policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. But the code, to which comic book creators adhered to in varying degrees, certainly did not mandate against the presentation of the positive roles played by institutions. More deeply, therefore, we believe that superheroes existed apart from societal institutions because a literary decision was made to portray them as exaggerated individualists as opposed to collectivists. Superheroes are Horatio Alger in tights, and as such, they convey the thoroughly incorrect message that one can live and achieve something important with little help or influence from others. When larger social institutions are occasionally on focus in the comics, they are not depicted as the source of good, but rather as obstacles and challenges to overcome. There is one feature of the larger social world of superheroes that is worth noting, and that is the existence of obvious good and obvious evil. Positive psychology is based on the premise that both are genuine and worthy of study, but it can be difficult to make the same distinctions in the real world, which is so often morally gray. People want, indeed perhaps need, to see the world in moral terms, and comic books readily afford such perceptions. Superheroes are morally just, and villains are thoroughly wicked. Is the stark simplicity of the comic book world a drawback in conveying moral examples? We think not. One of the truisms from the legal and legislative world is that difficult cases make for bad laws. It is better to start with a simple case and proceed to the complex, rather than starting with the complex and proceed to nowhere. Perhaps the same principle has been adopted by comic book creators. Conclusions. We have examined superheroes in light of what positive psychology has learned about the life worth living, asking if superheroes are also super people. Our major...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?